Today I'll show you how I made this weatherproof cover for my key switch and windlass switch. I made all this out of fiberglass without molds. And it's got this flange here so that any water that runs underneath the lid will go around the opening rather than in where the key switch is. I got this little baking tin with a lid, and I'm not going to use the lid, but the baking tin fits very nicely over the switches that I need to protect from the weather. So I'm going to use this baking tin as the only mold for making these two parts that work together to protect my key switch. So here's my aluminum baking tin, and I'm taping it down and then covering it with blue tape because I'm guessing fiberglass won't stick to the blue tape as well as it sticks to the aluminum. And now I'm just going to cover that shape with fiberglass, and hopefully I'll wind up with a piece of hardened fiberglass in the shape of the tin. And now I'm going to cut the top off of it. And I'm measuring at about the height that I think the key will stick up. And I put a few coats of paste wax on the glass table, so this separates pretty easily once I'm done. And that's what it looks like. It's going to be too cold to fiberglass the next few days, so I'm going to have to take the show on the road. That refrigerator, unfortunately, had been left out in the weather so long it doesn't work anymore, but one of the glass shelves will work out pretty nice for this. I cleaned it up and put a couple coats of wax on it before taping this down. And now I'm at home where it's a climate-controlled environment and fiberglass will harden here. Speaking of harden. So this is more of my super pookie. It's fiberglass resin that's been catalyzed and 1/4-inch chopped glass fibers and some aerosil. It's fumed silica, and it's a thickener that'll make the fiberglass thick enough to sculpt it more or less like clay. And now I can take this clay off. It just supported that pookie until it was hardened. And I'm going to take it outside and clean it up with the sander now. This is what it looks like at this point. That flange thing with the pookie is so that rainwater will run around the opening rather than going in. and I can use the sander to get rid of any of these fuzzies and stuff at the edge, and also some of the flash where that pookie was sort of spread out beyond where I wanted it from on the clay. And just because the belt breaks on your belt sander doesn't mean you can't still use it. And an angle grinder works as well. And so that's how that part looks at this point. And once again it gets taped down. This clay is oven baked clay, and it's very fine grained. It sculpts like porcelain, but it never dries out like porcelain, so it doesn't shrink or, you know, get hard or anything. So it works really good for stuff like this. I'm not going to bake it in the oven. I'm just using it to make this shape at the moment. And it's completely recyclable if you use it in this way. And now that I've got the shape for the cover that goes over the first piece, I'm going to lay fiberglass over this. And once that's hardened, I can separate it from the clay and the lower piece, and I should have two pieces, my original piece and a lid that goes over the top of it. These little wedges are made for separating fiberglass parts from their mold. This separates easy because the mold is just this soft clay. And if you use the oven baked clay, alcohol works nice to clean up. And here's the two fiberglass parts, the original part and the lid. And at this point I'm going to put some gel coat on both parts. I'm going to cheat a little bit here and put this on really thick on the horizontal surface and get a smoother finish than I would normally have on these parts. Here I'm cutting a little square out of chopped strand mat, and I'm going to tape it to a straw and then roll it up and use tape to hold it down at the ends. I actually tried a lot of different things in order to try to make this part, and actually got some advice from some viewers in the comments, although this was the thing that I was going to try next after the suggestion. So this happened to work, so this is what I wound up doing. And once it's hardened, I can... It didn't want to roll around the straw very well, so it left a lot of splinters sticking up. But sanding it knocked those down, and it makes a pretty nice tube. And this is a stainless steel bolt, 1/4 20, 3.5 inches long, with a nylock nut for the other end. And here I'm marking to cut the tube into 3 pieces. And I'm also going to mark this little bit of flange that's left on this part so it gets cut like this. And those 2 little tabs that are left fit the outermost 2 of the 3 pieces of that tube. And I'm using a little bit of super pookie to glue those 2 outer pieces to this lid, while using the centerpiece as a spacer and making sure I don't get any pookie on the centerpiece. And now that that's hardened, I could sand it a little bit, and it's more or less ready to go. The next step is gluing the middle third of the fiberglass tube to the lower part of this. And again, it's assembled with the bolt and the lid pieces to make sure that they all line up. And once that's hardened, I can separate this, and that tape just made sure that no pookie glued the 2 parts together. And here's how the 2 pieces fit together. There's the lid that covers everything, and then that raised piece with the flange that makes sure any water that flows underneath the lid can't go in the hole where the key switch is. And I finished this up with some gel coat. This last bit of gel coat has wax in it.